This is going to be an intense video where I bring together all the ingredients, many of the ingredients that I have acquired over the duration of the last 3 years or so, and mix them together in a recipe for revelation. And I realize why I do it and why I'm so frustrated when I see other people wanting to do nothing but chase the cheese in the rat maze and run on that hamster wheel. Because I know that if I had the same strategy of success in life as everyone else, a self-centered, taking a shot for the American dream, I'd have my house and my car, and I'd have done way better than almost every one of them. But I decided to do something different. Flip that table over so people stop chasing that cheese and show them so much more to the world that it will not make sense anymore for them to chase that cheese and run on that hamster wheel, to set them free. So let's do this.
End up combining two of my videos together to make one. I was out walking the other day and filmed that I had two shadows, and not just me, but other people that were around me, which proves that there are more than one light source in the sky. I was watching Martin Lika today, and he was talking about the suns and that they have been filming two suns. So I thought, how befitting that I went out walking yesterday and I filmed two shadows. So I guess I'm going to combine this for an introduction to what I filmed yesterday. So I hope everyone enjoys the two shadows. It's not a very long video. It was just to make a point that yesterday, for some reason, we had two shadows going on. I'd been walking around there for quite a while and I had never noticed double shadows. But so something was going on yesterday, and I'm sure it was to do with experiments for a secondary light source. Other than that, why wouldn't I have seen that before? So I had just been talking to my neighbor Al, and he thinks it's atmospheric rain drops in the air. So he had to admit too that he hadn't seen that double shadow thing going on either. So enough of me prattling on, and enjoy the little video. Have a great day. Okay, now I finally got it. I had to disconnect from
So what she's going to show you is that each of her shadows, one is just a vertical video and the other one is horizontal video. She has a second shadow that comes way up here above the end of her obvious shadow. Likewise over here, there's the head and the end of her obvious shadow, and then another one that comes way up here. There are people that ride bikes and walk by, and you can see that everyone else has a double shadow also. I'm about to show you another video where trucks and cars driving down the road have a double shadow, except in the example I'm going to show you next, the shadows go in opposite direction, like there is a sun on opposite sides of the sky. In this case, both the light sources are behind her. The one that shoots this shadow way up there is like down on the horizon, just above the horizon. And the one that puts this shadow right here is 10 or 20 or 30 degrees up in the sky further. But they're both directly in alignment with one another. The one that casts the darker shadow is higher in the sky. The one that casts the more faint shadow is lower in the sky. And we're going to talk about how that is the black sun, most likely, or a sun simulator. Highly likely black sun. And there we go, I got a little better lighting. It is easier to see in this case when they're moving, when she moves back and forth, or when the people come and walk by and ride their bikes by, you can totally see the shadow. It goes zoom. But when you pause it like this, it's not as easy to see the shadow right here as when it's all in motion.
Look at this. There's a shadow here, the dark one, and there's a shadow above it. So when I'm walking, I've got a double shadow, which is completely impossible.
See, the person just walked by, had a second shadow?
For there's more than one lighting source. What in the world? How is that right? Look, I've got a complete double shadow. Look, everyone that passes me has a double shadow too. I'll go over here, and you can see it on the grass. There's a double shadow. Here come some people. And I'm just going to film. Yep. Their shadows go all the way up to the fence line. It's the craziest thing. I've got a double shadow going on. It's crazy. It's a double shadow.
We're going to rewind and show you what was on the
You can
bench
see it
right there.
walking with me. I'll go back a little bit. Oh my God, the further I go back, the higher the shadow goes on top. Okay, that's seriously weird. So that should be enough so you can see the double shadow. And they got double shadows too as they're walking. So it's not just me. Okay.
Okay, in this part, you're going to see her walk in front of this bench right here. And leading up to the bench, you can see that she's wearing a long shirt or a skirt or something that's hanging down right here. I'll rewind it and show it and let you see it a couple times. But then when she passes in front of the bench, there's another set of shadow that appears very clearly. The only possibility is that it was a long skirt, but you can see in between her legs right here, there is nothing, like she's wearing pants.
It's crazy. It's a double shadow.
I had to turn the brightness down, but here you can see her main shadow, and then over here is a secondary shadow. And I believe what's going on here is directly related to what's going on up here. The only other possibility is she's wearing a really big dress, like a Hawaiian dress that drapes all the way around her and is sheer with like fishnet holes in it. Now watch, I'm going to turn the volume down so you can focus just on the visuals as she goes in front of that bench. Then I'm going to show you the other people that pass by in front of her. Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm having trouble with the lighting, so you'll just have to click on the original and I'll show you that you can see a shirt hanging down to here, approximately like she's wearing a long t-shirt, that she's not wearing a dress, she's wearing pants. Now that I got the lighting approximately right, this whole area from here and in between her legs, clear out to like here, is a secondary shadow, a light pinkish shadow. There's a good spot where it stops for us. Here's the edge of the second shadow. Coming clear back here. You can see the pinkish color here. And even on the front side of her here is where that second shadow is running. So I'm going to show you a couple of times the people that drive by in front of her and try and move on because this is already getting way too long. We got a lot to pack in here. Here you're going to see someone walk by and their second shadow is much more obvious and visible because they are moving. This one moves by much quicker. On the vertical video, you can see them starting to enter in the scene. They're riding a bicycle. On the horizontal, you can barely see the top of their head here, but you can see their whole extra shadow up here. But it moves by quickly, so you'll have to watch for this bicyclist to move past here. And on this one, all you can see is the top of their head, but you can clearly see their whole shadow up here. Here comes a different bicyclist riding by. These last ones aren't as obvious, but when you can see it, you can see it. Watch the originals for much greater visual clarity. They all have two shadows. So her video at Tree of Knowledge, Sonia's video, was about 6 months ago. This video was posted 6 days ago, and each one of these vehicles has a stronger shadow off to this side and a weak shadow off to this side, and it's being filmed by a truck driver who knows what they're looking at. That's the front of a truck driver's truck, and that's his hood ornament. I'm gonna leave the volume down for now because Angry Catfish is pretty angry and I don't want it to distract you from what we're looking at. And he gets his cursor up there to do a great job of it. Like you need his cursor to be able to see what he's trying to show you. It's very distracting. He's going to push play here in a minute, but he's going to continue circling his cursor around as if you need to see his cursor. Two shadows going opposite directions. Unlike Sonia's, who had two shadows going the same direction, stacked one on top of another. This is proof of two light sources. And most likely, the black sun that is being spoken of. This guy, Angry Catfish, we're going to reference him a couple more times in this video, where he says we actually have 3 suns in our midst right now, and one of them is an ultraviolet black sun. You know, like the black sun, as we saw on the armband of the Azov battalion fighting in Ukraine, and on the shirt of that bunch of guys in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho that were supposedly stuffed up in the back of a U-Haul van gonna go interrupt a pride parade, and one of them was wearing a sweatshirt or a t-shirt that said Bigfoot Land, and it had an image of the black sun on it. James True showed us this, and we're going to get some other gravy from James True in this video. But you can clearly see a shadow going both ways off of these vehicles. Now we're going to watch the first few minutes of a video that I created titled Eyes to See in the UV Blacklight Spectrum of the Age of Aquarius, Multispectral Perception Piercing the Veil, where I cover 3 James True videos, number 278, 279, and 280. And then I'm going to get on. I got a lot of material to cover. So that was those 4 live plasma fires. Old comers and newcomers alike have never seen them all put together. Even the old viewers, if you've seen all 4 of them, it was because you saw them live, or you had to hunt and peck through my videos to bring them all together. They've never been brought together like that. So there'll be those 4 live plasma fire links in the description. And as I was bringing together this video, the content for this video, I remembered that I had made a video titled Eyes to See More Frames Per Second. And as I went to grab it, as a reference resource material, I see that they gave me this thumbnail photo. Again, I've never chosen any of my thumbnail photos. This thumbnail photo is perfectly appropriate, and it proves that the AI is working with me. In a video that I titled Eyes to See More Frames Per Second, referencing the single frames that I was extracting from Sandals commercials and other things, they give me this as a thumbnail. You could not pull this out and utilize it as your own thumbnail. This is crafted from a high-speed camera with greater frames per second, looking at slower speed video, or vice versa, where you can clearly see 2 frames are melded into this one single thumbnail image. The AI produced that for me as a thumbnail. For the content in that video, and for the title that I gave it, because it appears as if they took 2 different images and kind of blended them together. In this video, I talk about if you're in a fight with someone and you see 5 or 10 frames per second, and they're seeing it 60 frames per second, they're going to kick your ass and there's no competition. Because you'll see one frame where it's kind of like their hand is down at their side here, and there's a blurry line between that and the hand right in front of your face, because you're only taking 5 frames per second. So we'll work our way back around to this video and that thumbnail, which was quite the coincidence, because that's kind of how you would see if you only saw with 3 or 4 frames per second, something to that effect. So we'll work our way back around to this video, but in the content of that video, I talk about single frames that I used to see in the sandals commercials for these exclusive resorts that cater to the most exclusive and exquisite tastes. And they would be slipping single frames in there, and I made some VHS tapes and took them to the FBI and the state capitol building. We'll get back to more of that. We'll even watch some of that. But the single frames that I was referencing in that video, eyes to see more frames per second, that I was catching and recording at 20 years old, taking them to the FBI Cyber Squad division, Sonia Sorensen in Salt Lake at the FBI building, dropping them off VHS tapes, and Paula Houston, Pornography and Obscenity States Ombudsman at the Utah State Capitol building. I went there a couple times and dropped off VHS tapes where it slowed down and I recorded it in slow motion and showing and illustrating these single frames. I guarantee those ladies remember the content I delivered. Whether or not they remember my name, it blew their mind what I showed them, that they're slipping single frames in commercials. And I was able to see these at like 20 years old. Took them to the FBI, and I was 20 years ahead of my time is what it was. So on an MB3 video from yesterday, this is the still frame from the Mr. MBB333 video. A lady caught what appears to be some sort of craft in a single frame on a video that she took. Not from an airplane. But we'll get back to that. Okay, that wasn't enough of a truth nugget. So this is a helicopter that's in the same frame, and this thing appears for a single frame. And so you might be able to say, well, it's the camera she's using that runs at higher frame rates per second, but she picked it up, she caught it, she noticed it, and sent it to Mr. MB3. And he goes over and analyzes it pretty good to show you that it's not a bug, it's not a bird. We're also going to talk about some cubes and spheres that are in the sky, and they're not going away, and they're here to stay, so we got to deal with it. But on the eyes to see more frames per second, Jay Dreamers did Truth in Movies, where he talks about us being able to see the world in a different light, particularly ultraviolet. He talks about the lenses that were, the substance to make ultraviolet lenses were made illegal until recently, and they created patent to create those kind of glasses where you can see in ultraviolet. James True tries to explain the Mandela effect, that we have now a higher resolution. He says you now see in 1080p and you used to be in 780p, like pixels per square inch. And he talks about there being a new light spectrum that is based on black, like the RGB red, green, blue spectrum. The white light spectrum is based on white, and that there is a new light spectrum frequency that we can see in based on black. Black light, another word for black light, is ultraviolet. So I'll be using clips from all three of James True's explanation of the Mandela effect, using this new perspective on reality that we have, that he explains as part of, we're all struggling to survive in the light of Corona. The original video that I took that got my channel wiped out of the sun, the Corona opening up and making a portal, was a 19-second video. We'll talk a little more about that later. So also as resource references and links that will be in the description is James True's explanation of how this works, where the amygdala regulates melanin and dopamine that go to the eyeball and literally change what you can see. Like that phrase, eyes to see, most Christians just think of it like a metaphor, like you can see that Jesus is the truth. Not like actually people being able to see things that aren't there. Literally, he says you're an Aquarian because you see things that aren't there. I'll get into this in greater detail, but I'm going to be using clips from the 3 Mandela effect videos. I'll probably just include the Eye of Ra as a reference. And there's also going to be this link in the description about how you are two. Your mind is split into two. I will reference this at some point during the breakdown of this whole idea that's coming together over the last couple of weeks. We even throwing in some David Nino Rodriguez, or yeah, that's his name, where he talks about this near-death experience. It's collective near-death experience. The people that he's talking to, the best and brightest minds he has access to, tell him that we are in an initiation ritual, the collective initiation, like what Greg Braden referenced in his videos titled Awakening to 0 Point and Beyond 0 Point, the collective initiation. That 0 point is magnetic zero, where the magnetics on the planet reach zero. And so this collective initiation, where they put us through a collective near-death experience, is what triggers the opening of that Eye of Ra. James True talks about how even people like that have no melanin in their skin are schizophrenic statistically more often. Albinos. But anyway, he talks about when the near-death experience happens, your amygdala releases and allows you to see everything. And that might be what the original baptism was, a near-death experience via drowning, where you could open up your third eye, let the amygdala release, and literally see things that aren't there, or at least that other people can't see. And by putting us collectively through this near-death experience, we will all have that ability to see more. And or it has something to do with a light frequency from the sun. So all of these guys reference, and I'm going to show you some more guys, including Marfugo and some other guys that are in on a group talk, but particularly Jay Dreamers here, he says he believes that something happens and we can see differently. And that's what I was saying during my original trip to Missouri, is that in the end, it'll be like in the movie They Live, where they kick over the transmitter. Suddenly everyone can see things for what they really are, see everyone for their true colors. And they will see it in the others, but not in themselves, the monster. Even these guys, just a couple days ago, I was listening to their podcast or whatever, and at 1 hour, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, they talk about how the sun reveals these interdimensional beings. So on with the clips that I'm talking about, and I'm going to string them together to show you how this idea has kind of been building for a while around me with these other people that are all kind of touching on it, and then get back to that video that I spoke of in the beginning. We're even going to include a Joe Imbriano clip. You can see him and recognize him by his hair. So James True made a series of 3 videos attempting to explain some of the Mandela effect using this idea that we see in a different way now, like we see in a different light wave frequency. And this raster versus vector is one analogy that he gave.
That's not the first slide. There we go. So, as I said, we've been through these basic ones. They're a lot more deeper. In fact, we've utilized...
He explains how the left brain and right brain see the world in these 2 different ways relating to raster and vector, and this is what would relate to the video I've linked in the comments section titled UR2, which goes over some of the scientific experiments that they've done on people where they literally sever the 2 hemispheres of the brain. They go in there with a razor or a laser and sever the 2 hemispheres, and the person can still live, but it makes some drastic differences. And in this new frequency that we're able to see, and it may have to do with the merging of those 2 hemispheres.
We're pretending the left brain and the right brain are all the same. We'll just skip over that for now. But as we are gaining momentum in this wonderful dojo earth, one of the things that the corona does is start to build connections that were not there before. That you have the ability to function in this world.
Build connections that were not there before, like between the left brain and the right brain.
Build connections that were not there before. That you have the ability to function in this world where the left brain and the right brain don't even talk to each other. This is a syndrome even. In fact, fact, it used to be that these people we call scientists tend to just be psychotic, like, let's put a pig heart in somebody and they're not vaccinated, right? But one of these many experiments is they decided to sever the connection between the left and the right brain, and that it turned out those people were completely functional. There was a schism in the way that they processed certain information, certain long-term memory issues were propping up.
Okay, so we just watched the first 15 minutes of Eyes to See in the UV blacklight spectrum of the age of Aquarius, multispectral analysis piercing the veil. Now I want to watch the first 10 minutes of a video with a similar name, titled Optogenetics UV blacklight spectrum of the Aquarius, blue sun, blue beam, blue bus. And the idea is that you watch the remainder of these that are all linked in the description if you'd like to know how that second light source that's creating those second shadows is affecting us. A lot of the stuff in this video is going to be building on and adding to the information covered in this video titled Eyes to See in the UV blacklight spectrum of Aquarius, multispectral perception piercing the veil. In that video, I cover James True's, I use excerpts from episode number 278, 279, and 280, where he attempts to explain the Mandela effect using an understanding that says, in his words, nearly verbatim, whether or not you like it, in the light of Corona, you've gone from 780p to 1080p, as in an increase of resolution due to more pixels per square inch. Or as I've discussed before, frames per second, you have higher resolution. James was also talking about a blacklight spectrum that's not based on white, the RGB red, green, blue spectrum, where all the colors are added together to make white, but it is a subtractive process from black. And he goes on to talk about how magenta was not a color that previously existed. Remember this, magenta was not a color that previously existed prior to the modern age and the advent of computers. Jay Dreamers is about to tell you that blue is a color that never existed prior to our current era. Also in this video, Eyes to See in the UV blacklight spectrum of Aquarius, I go over Jay Dreamer's take on the movie They Live, where he shows you, in his opinion, his breakdown of it, is that those glasses in They Live are like ultraviolet lenses. And he shows you examples of what ultraviolet lenses do and how it turns everything kind of a black and white color. And that's why every time the guy puts on the glasses to see they who live, you know, the reptilian alien guys, everything turns kind of black and white. But at the end of the movie, when they break the transmitter and suddenly everyone can see them. And the sun, the black sun in our sky now, is ultraviolet light that will work as those glasses do in the movie They Live. For who they are, it's no longer in black and white because they don't need those special UV glasses. They're in a different spectrum of light, and that's what Jay Dreamer says in this video. I show that he says there will be a new light spectrum in our atmosphere, in our environment. This is Angry Catfish from yesterday.
We haven't really had a winter this winter because we've got 3 suns in very close proximity. The one's right behind us. It's a blue sun, ultraviolet, black light. You can't see it with your eyes. You can see the results of the freaking light in your skies.
This is Suspicious Observer from yesterday.
Life intact when they happen again. Now, folks, this story is wild. The light anomalies in the camera, they are not at all indicative of lightning, and they darn sure aren't signatures of dark matter as these authors have guessed. As we see one of the vertical bolts here, some notes. You can tell it's real and not a camera glitch because it wouldn't be behind the trees. That's a real beam. It's one of 4 detected in a matter of moments, all in less than half a second. All instantaneously appeared and then disappeared without craters, surface behind the trees. That's a real beam. It's one of 4 detected in a matter of moments, all in less than half a second. All instantaneously appeared and then disappeared without craters, surface burn scars, and no thunder. That's why they guess macro dark matter, but even they mention major problems with that. They were clustered in time and location and have never otherwise been seen. Where would the other examples of this be? Furthermore, they lament its vertical profile, which would be quite the coincidence for any impacting particle, let alone 4 unique signatures in half a second. They do correctly hypothesize that the light is caused by glow mode plasma in a beam, and I will say that that's got Earth's geomagnetic L-shell lines written all over it. At the ground level, they are basically vertical. In addition to the solar flares ongoing during the sightings of those beams on Valentine's Day, the magnetic field of Earth is tossing anomalies at us left and right as it shifts. You may recall, the North Magnetic Pole has moved more, but it did have further to go. It's racing towards Siberia at this point. The South Pole is heading to meet it in the Indian Ocean, heading right past Perth and changing their geomagnetic field scenario quickly, which is a great explanation for the beams as those fields encounter new crustal fields and atmospheric conditions. And something I didn't notice before, the greater spread between the latest dots means the South Magnetic Pole is speeding up. And this marks the first time we've shared that tidbit here on YouTube.
So he said that there was 4 of these within a half a second in Perth, Australia. And that the way you can tell it's not a lens flare or a crack on the lens or anything happening inside the camera is because it goes behind the tree here, behind the roof here, and you can still see it a little bit there. Any sort of lens flare anomaly can't be behind a tree or behind a cloud. This is a thumbnail from Mr. MB3's video that he put out today, but it was one of those little short videos, so you can't even see the thumbnail other than in your notifications. That's why these little letters are over here. Because typically you can go to the video and then go back and then come back to the video and it routes you to the thumbnail photo. But it was one of those short videos. Nowhere in that video do you see this image. And I found it curious that he used an image of a sun, not only with a halo around it, but with little black square cube in the middle of it. Mr. MB3 has been catching 10.5 UV readings for the last 4 or 5 days, up until today and yesterday, and it dropped to like 9.5. Those are still summertime UV readings. Like there's a hole in the magnetic field to the point where it's letting enough solar radiation through that he's catching UV A and B at summertime readings. And then he shows you that there's UVC and that you should never read that. It should always be 0 at ground level, other than in the Arctic, where the magnetic field allows that solar plasma in. So in 2018, maybe even 2019, Mr. MB3 used to do UV readings on a daily basis. But then he quit, and for the next 2 years, he showed you genetic mutations of fruit and vegetables, from strawberries, tomatoes, sunflowers, clovers that are 4, 5, and 6 leaf clovers littered all over the ground, the size of your palm. These are all genetic mutations from that radiation that he was showing you the readings of the prior 2 years. But then he stopped doing the UV readings and just showed you the results, the effect. He rarely does UV readings anymore, or at least he rarely publishes them, other than recently when he decided to show you that we're catching summertime UV, even high, super high summertime UV readings in the winter. And that it should be down around a 2 or 3, but it's up around a 9. And this video was made 6 months ago. And those UV readings, you're used to hearing that UVA, UVB, and UVC. That stands for ultraviolet, just like the black sun that we're discussing here. 3 is the expected UV readings for this day, but it's up at a 10.5 for the last 4 or 5 days. So that's indicative of a hole in the magnetic field. This is a thumbnail from a video that Suspicious Observer put out today. He's the guy that put out the 4 beams from yesterday that we just watched. So that don't look quite like Mount Meru in the middle. And those videos where he showed you the plasma beams coming down, those apparently came from Perth, Australia. But it looks like Mr. Suspicious Observers might be alluding to that blue beam that Jay Dreamers talks about in his cosmology. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We'll get to Jay Dreamers here in a second. This is a thumbnail from Marfugal News a few days ago. It seems to be alluding to the black sun, that blue ultraviolet sun maybe that Angry Catfish was talking about.
Which turns her mouth blue. Blue, depending on how far back you go in time, the color blue is also anachronistic because the color blue, technically, they say, did not exist. I would like to read you something pertaining to this, okay? There's a great study that you can do if you look into the color blue not existing except for in modern times. So this website here says, considering the Earth's oceans, waterways, and atmosphere, it seems the color blue is all around us, right? Well, it may come to a shock to you, but most ancient people never saw the color blue. That's right. Blue wasn't recognized. I feel like Miss Minutes should be reading this, right? Blue, where was I? Blue wasn't recognized in early human history because many cultures did not have a word for it. And strange things happen in societies when there isn't a word for something. Without a word, it becomes much harder to see that particular thing. Now, this is from a website trying their best to explain why there was no mention of the color blue until modern times. I'm going to disagree with this website and give you my own theory, right? The theory is that after each one of our cataclysmic shifts, the sky goes from blue to red, back to blue, back to red. It goes back and forth, right? And there's also other colors in there in between, depending on proximity to the center of the Earth, your location, and some other things as well. But mainly, the sky is a reddish spectrum or a bluish spectrum. Okay, and there may be a transitory period in between those as well. So they try to explain this away by saying that they didn't have a word for the color blue. If the color blue always existed, why in the world would century after century, for millennia, no one would come up with a descriptor for that particular color? I don't buy that. What they're trying to say is if the word doesn't exist, then people become blind to it. They just can't see it because there's no word for it. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. You know what I mean?
I'm sure you noticed that the video wasn't synced up with the audio. Could you imagine walking around and in real life it starts doing that? Like sound speeds up and light slows down so you hear someone before you see their lips move? Stretch your mind, man. And here I think Jay Dreamers is touching on the great philosopher Jim Morrison's preposition to take a chance with us and meet me on the back of the blue bus.
I don't know what that is, so let's skip that. Oh, it's a school bus. Okay, so remember, Sylvie, the female version of Loki, she pruned herself and she wakes up in the same trash world that Loki now finds himself on. She wakes up inside of a bus, right? Just like Loki woke up at the bus stop, and there's a bus right there. You can see it, right? This is huge, and it's purposefully done that they put her entry point in a bus, and they put his entry point at a bus stop, right? They have that bus symbolism. You'll see this a lot in video games, in movies, and the television. There is a bus. The bus, the reason that they have that is because the word bus comes from and is directly related to the word box. It means a container. Usually it's a blue bus. Okay, not always. Sometimes it's yellow. Sometimes it's seen as being a magic bus or a magic school bus, right? Or whatever. It's a blue bus. Okay, not always. Sometimes it's yellow. Sometimes it's seen as being a magic bus or a magic school bus, right? Or whatever. It represents our world being the box, a container. It comes from the word omnibus, which means everybody inside of the container, right? And our world is that container, which is why the bus is quite often blue or seen as being magical or being able to change sizes and stuff like that. It's symbolic of our world that we live in. And that's why they come out of the bus, or why there's portals inside of buses and stuff like that. All right, so Sylvie, wait.
So regarding this idea that we may be able to see things differently when there's a new light spectrum in our atmosphere, whether it's this blue ultraviolet sun that Angry Catfish says is creeping up behind us, or like James True says, in a blacklight spectrum where magenta is possible and that your resolution is increasing. I was able to adjust the color spectrum frequencies using just what was on my cheap Walmart phone, and decloak what's up in the sky. As you can see here on the back of each one of these triangles, it has little fins on the back, fins on the back, fins on the back. There's a bunch of these parked at the front of runways. Using the contrast and lighting and color adjustments on my phone, zooming in and taking a screenshot and repeating that process over and over, I was able to reveal what's above our heads. So this might be an indicator of something like what we might see when the color spectrum frequency in our atmosphere changes, something like what I was able to reveal using that same process, but in making the adjustments on the phone rather than in our atmosphere. Hold on. Prove intelligently designed craft of a massive size are right above our heads. So I'm just going to go over this real quick before I do a more thorough presentation when I'm going to grab some more images. But you can see these three triangle craft right there. They admit they got airborne aircraft carriers. Maybe I made them have to speed up the disclosure part. What you're seeing is intelligently designed craft in the sky. Much greater resolution on the other videos, because here I'm filming phone to phone for the third time, and it's just losing a lot of pixel clarity and quality. My point is, this is what I did using the phone, revealing that there's something above us. And outer space may actually look something more like this. The previous clips that I've used from J Dreamers here were from his decoding, if you will, of the movie Loki. Truth in Movies is what he calls it. But this is what he says when he shows this screenshot, is that outer space might look something more like this. And I've said before, it would probably be best just to assume that you've been taken aboard the mothership at some point, assimilated into an environment that represents your old environment you're used to, and that they're changing it quickly enough that you can't ignore it, but slowly enough that it won't send you into shock. My videos that I call Decloaking, Space Force, Airborne Aircraft Carrier, Floating Fortress, City in the Sky, originally, the best ones, I should say, with those triangle craft parked at the end of runway. People that have been watching my channel know what I'm talking about. People that don't, you'll have to go back and watch. But what that shows is that there's highly advanced machinery above us in the sky. And I have revealed that in other videos where I took off my front porch. That one that shows the airborne aircraft carrier is a screenshot that I took from a video that was produced by a YouTube channel called KCKid913, where he makes his own homemade Santilli telescope, which is a dome lens. Here we're going to look at KC Kid's original video where I show you the Santilli telescope. Here he does a screenshot slideshow of his own video.
Were you recently injured in a car accident?
That's it. Just that. Hanging out his car window, you can see his mirror up here of his car window. I went to this guy's house in Kansas City, Olaf. He lives in Olath, O-L-A-T-H, near Kansas City. Okay, so you get that. That's it, that's all there is to it. Beautification mirror and a magnifying dome lens that you get from Staples, and put it inside of a bowl to cut down the light around the outside. Here he takes some screenshots of his own video, and remember this little part right here, this is what I call the high volt tether or microwave thruster. And I believe the sun is over here, and it's hard to say what this is, but this is where I got those screenshots from, where I reveal the Airborne aircraft carrier. That's all he's doing, is showing still frames from the video that we just watched, that he made hanging it out his car door window. And the still frame that I took my shots from and zoomed in on is that original thumbnail photo where you can see that high volt tether clear as a bell. He's focusing in on some of these other things like that red circle. What is that? Is that a planet? Is that a second sun? What are all the rest of these things? I don't know. But I know I zoomed in on these, and you could too. Run the contrast, zoom in. And I revealed the Airborne aircraft carrier. City in the sky, floating fortress. Call it what you will. In fact, I'll show you right where I zoomed in. There's the high volt tether, there's the sun, or what I'm assuming is the sun, and I zoomed in right in between the two, and that's where I pulled the Airborne aircraft carrier from. You could zoom in over here or over there and run some contrast, see what you pull out. I only got a few minutes left and I want to get to this video. Santilli telescope proofs, collective initiation. You're all Freemasons now, and a sun behind the sun. But first we're going to go over Oops, Christ Did It Again, part 1 of 3.